I am so excited to introduce our speaker for today, New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of more than 20 historical romance novels, Tessa Dare. Tessa is the author of such series as Castles Ever After, Spindle Cove, personally my favorite, and her newest series, which might also be my favorite, just all of them, The Girl Meets Duke. And the fourth installment will be out sometime this year. If that's correct, right, Tessa? Maybe?
It doesn't have a specific date right now,
okay.
So I can't say for sure, but
it
will be coming out.
It gives you time to go read the first 3 in the Girl Meets Duke series. And then, so really, this is a blessing for you. Go read those books so you can be prepared. And mixing with sensuality and emotion, Tessa writes Regency set romance novels that feel relatable to modern readers, and we get to talk to her about them today. So thank you so much for being here, Tessa.
Thank you so much for having me. This is really fun and exciting. Sometimes there's some good things that come out of this crazy year that we've had, and being able to speak with libraries and groups in a wider range of areas has been one of them. So it's great that you're having this series. And Lord of Scoundrels is one of my favorite romances ever. So if anybody's debating whether to join that discussion, yes, read that book. Join that discussion. It's wonderful.
We have a Tessa Dare endorsement, so this is good.
Where the Chase is magnificent.
Oh, I'm really excited. The audiobook is really good so far. That's how I've been doing it. So if anybody
I have a
particularly
story
likes
about
audios,
meeting Laura the Chase, but I won't. This is boring. It's not that boring. It's embarrassing.
Oh no, I will not ask you to share anything embarrassing on our.
All right. No, I just like screamed in her face the first time I met her because I wasn't expecting it. I sat down we write for the same publisher, but she doesn't come to very many events, and so this time our conference was in New York, and she was at the party for the publisher, and I just happened to sit down next to her at a table, and she turned and I saw her name tag that said Loretta Chase, and I just like screamed in her face, just like ah! And then I think I like scared her back into a groundhog hole, and I've never seen her at a party again. It was really sorry.
So you're the reason she's a hermit author at this point.
I don't know. I don't know that she's a hermit, but
no,
maybe she's just avoiding me. That could be possible.
That's no.
She was
possible.
very nice about it. Very nice about it.
Well, thank you for sharing that. You are lovely. And so how did you start writing in general, and how did you find romance as your path?
I think I always wanted to be a writer of some sort. When I was young, I would write little stories, and my grandmother had saved one of my first little books that I illustrated way back when. It was about a squirrel and a cranberry. I read it over our Thanksgiving holiday when we were visiting her, I think. The unloved cranberry that got found by a squirrel and given the home it deserved.
Did they become friends? Or was he eaten?
I think so. I think that the cranberry was like bruised and was thrown away because I probably had been given the job of like sorting cranberries or something. And so there was a cranberry that was unappreciated and unloved and thrown, into the backyard, and a squirrel found it. And I don't know, I guess they became friends. Yeah. I remember her name was Martha, the cranberry.
Is there any chance you would consider publishing that as a novella for all of us to read?
Sure. Well, it definitely wasn't that long. It's probably with my parents now. My grandmother kept it, and it's probably with their things now. I'd have to ask.
Oh my gosh, I want to read the cranberry
Lost
story.
to history. So that was my first book, and it was only up from there. No, and then I started writing romance about 15 years ago, and I'd always loved historical romance and historical fiction, and I was a particularly huge fan of Jane Austen, and that's pretty much what pushed me toward Regency romance. And I was at home with a new baby, all those rushes of hormones and whatnot. And also, when you have a new baby, you don't want to read anything. Well, at least I didn't want to read anything too scary or, I used to like a lot of mysteries and thrillers, and I just couldn't read them then. So I was focused totally on romance and just sort of steeped in it. And I just, that's when I started writing again and started writing in particular romance.
Wonderful. So in your bio, it says that you trained as a librarian. Did you work in libraries?
Oh yeah, I was a public librarian for about 10 years full time, and then for several more years, just, you know, part time here and there after I had kids. Yeah, I love being a librarian, and I had to kind of give it up once I became a full-time writer, but I still miss it. It's a great job. You learn something new every day.
Well, if you ever want to come work in
being a librarian,
come work in St. Mary's County, if you decide this whole international, you know, best-selling author thing doesn't work, you know,
yeah, right.
We'll take you here.
You never know. You never know. It's just, and I love being a librarian. I miss it.
Do you think that affected your writing at all? Did it help you figure out what sort of books people would be looking for?
Oh, absolutely. I don't know if it helped me figure out particularly how to write to certain interests, but I was a children's and young adult librarian for the most part. And I did a lot of story times. So I read to a lot of preschoolers and younger elementary school kids. And I think that is almost one of the best ways to learn to write fiction. It is amazing because you can see on their faces whether you have lost them or if they're interested. In fact, I do a whole workshop sometimes about how, what interacting with and reading to kindergartners, it's called like Everything I Know About Writing I Learned from Kindergartners, that is about how that experience of reading to kids teaches you so much about how to do pacing and how to skip the boring parts. You know, there's a great quote from Elmore Leonard, I think it says, I just try to leave out the parts that people skip. So, you know, sometimes you can read, and if you've ever tried to read a book to a young child and they're getting, you know, squirmy and there's these long paragraphs of description and whatnot, and you just start skipping them or you skip pages altogether to get to the interesting parts. That's a really good experience because it let me know, you know, hopefully how to skip boring parts. That's the goal great. Anyway. Yes, I definitely think that librarianship helped prepare me for being a writer.
That's wonderful. And that's just good advice for reading to your own kids too. Skip those boring parts. They don't care. Yeah.
And none of us should be forced to read things that we find boring. I really think that's the easiest way to kill a kid's love of reading is to force them to read anything, first of all, and to make them read things that they don't like. Let children read what they enjoy.
You heard it from Tessa Dare. Listen to her.
That's right.
So what is your favorite trope to write? And are there any that it's just not for you? You won't find certain ones in your books?
I don't know. I don't know that it's a trope, but I tend to write heroines who are kind of quirky, nerdy, have very unique interests, sort of misfits. I think I just identify more with that. As for tropes that I don't like or I don't write, I think I've read some really good books with this trope, but one that I have a hard time getting behind, especially in a modern step romance, is the secret baby books, because I am always just like, how? You know what? Actually, in the Regency, it would be pretty easy to write a secret baby and make that realistic. It's totally believable that you could have a child and nobody would know. But I think it's really hard to explain well in a modern setting how you have a baby and one of the parents just doesn't have any idea unless somebody's been hiding, which makes them very difficult to redeem. So yeah, that's one trope that I'm not particularly fond of, but you know what? A really good writer can sell me on just about anything. And I think that that's the case for books in general.
That's great. So Spindle Cove basically sounds like the best place in the world in the Regency era, if not now. Did that have any historical inspiration? Were there any places like that you know of?
Oh, wow. Well, there were definitely seaside resort type places. If anybody watched Sanditon, the series that was a BBC series and has been shown on PBS in America, it's a whole series based off an incomplete Jane Austen novel that takes place in a seaside resort town. However, it is not exclusively or mainly occupied by women, as Spindle Cove is. So I think I was always in love with this Victorian idea in that you read in classics and in romance novels, that a woman who had who was just like not thriving in society could be sent to the seaside for her constitution. To me that always sounded awesome. Like, please send me to the seaside where I'm not supposed to do anything but drink broth and read books and take an occasional walk on the beach. This sounds amazing. So I think part of it was wish fulfillment in that way, but also it's just a way to kind of get women and the heroines I kind of wanted to write, and the ones that I'm probably best at writing, out of the London setting and into a place where they could really sort of be themselves and flourish away from the judgmental eyes of high society or the expectations of their families.
I love that. I love that you were able to find a way to give them a little bit more freedom, but still keep them without making it seem unrealistic in the setting of the Regency era.
Yeah, I mean, some parts of it might be unrealistic, but that's what fiction is for, right?
It's fiction. Yeah. So speaking of, historical accuracy, what sort of research do you do to make your books as authentic as possible?
Well, being a librarian, I love research. So I think that stopping researching is probably the more difficult part of researching. When I was first starting, I had to research quite a bit, just the very basic bones of the time period, so I could have an idea, okay, what are these people holding in their hands, and what are they wearing, and this sort of thing. What does the carriage look like? Now I've written enough books that part of it is pretty much in my mind, and so now I research more specific things to the plot. For example, I wrote a couple of books ago, I wrote The Governess Game, and that heroine was very interested in astronomy and finding comets, which was a huge thing at the time, searching for comets. And, I found ways to incorporate that into the story and got very carried away researching all of the female astronomers of the time. And it was really fun. Or in this last book that I had out, The Wallflower Wager, the heroine is an animal rescuer, and she has a goat who is pregnant. And I have the hero of that book, and then the two heroes from the other books in this series, all be the only people around when the goat goes into labor. And so they have to act as midwives for this goat. And of course, they have no idea what they're doing. And I had no idea what they would be doing. So thank God for homesteaders who make a lot of vlogs, because I ended up researching goat labor and complications of goat labor and exactly what it looks like. And yeah, I don't know. I hope that if the government is surveilling my search history, it probably has some very big concerns about me. I don't know. I think that's the case for all writers, though. At least I don't write modern mysteries where I'm looking at poisons and things all the time. Yeah.
So speaking of goats, I actually had a question here for you. Did the Wallflower Wager goat, or did your love of goats come first?
Oh, love of goats first.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just my first chance to finally put a baby goat into a book, But I love baby goats, and anybody who follows me on social media knows that. And so it's become a snowball, because since people know that I love baby goats, they send me everything with a baby goat in it, and then I get to repost it. And so if you like baby goat content, and who doesn't, really?
Crazy people.
And you can come follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and you will probably get more than you ever wanted.
So the other thing that we have found on Twitter, if you are a follower of Tessa Dare, is your love of Anthony Bridgerton.
Oh, yes. So people send me Anthony Bridgerton things now as well. And so then, because the two were coming together, I decided that I needed a photo of Anthony Bridgerton holding a baby goat. And this is like now my goal online is to have this happen. And so a lot of lovely people have been photoshopping pictures of the two of them together. It's fantastic. It's amazing. But the ultimate goal is to get the actual shot. So, you know, we're lobbying the Bridgerton production company, everything. Put a baby goat in Anthony's arms, and we'll see. We'll see.
I will admit,
maybe 7 more seasons. You know, we have a lot of chances at this.
We discussed this in our romance book club, and there may have been a petition for the librarians to Instagram message the actor and say, "Could you go find a baby goat and take a picture with it for Tessa Dare?" But I lost my nerve, so I did that.
Yeah, you know what? I think Johnny Bailey, that's the actor's name. I think he's kind of like letting someone else manage his social media right now,
Probably
which is
smart.
Very smart. Yes. Yeah, so I follow a lot of accounts from the Brazilian Bridgerton fandom, which is amazing and intense, and they're fantastic. And I think that they probably get more engagement from the actors than anybody else because they were there before they even started filming season 1. And so sometimes you get some really good things there. And so if you can't get enough Bridgerton content in your social media, find some Brazilians and follow them.
Wonderful to know. Thank you. So Anthony, again, I know he's not your character, but I know you love him. He is a rake.
Yes.
Who do you enjoy writing rakes yourself? I feel like some of your characters are, some are not. How do you feel about rakes?
Oh yeah, I do. I mean, there's kind of that. I think that they have to have a rake, for example, for those who may not know, is a Regency playboy, you know, a womanizer type character. Although I think that most heroes who are rakes are not complete. They're not jerks, you know. They have to have a respect, a core respect for women at some point in order for me to really like them as a reader or as a writer. And perhaps they're just trying to fill some other need in their life with, you know, a series of affairs or something of that nature, or they've gotten a reputation that's not completely accurate. That's called the fake rake. I like those guys because they have the potential to really fall in love and be faithful, and you know, that can be what they really want, even if they don't know it. You know, somebody who is truly, what do you want to say? A rake who just uses women. I'm not really interested in writing or reading those. The question is always, right, can a rake really be redeemed, and can they be a good partner? And I think they can, but I like to see them having the idea of redeeming themselves before the heroine comes along, right? Some sort of sense that they're not just being saved by the sweet innocent virgin. They've kind of have a wish that they had something different in their lives.
I'm going to go ahead and recommend my favorite rake from Tessa's work, A Week to Be Wicked. Colin is just, I love Colin. He's the best. He's so sweet. He just needs to grow a little bit.
Yeah. And you know, he wants to be loved. He just, you know, and he has a lot of respect for women. Mm-hmm. He's not just using them.
No,
he enjoys their company,
but he falls for Minerva,
and
the nerdy
he's just
girl,
very charming. He's almost too charming for his own good.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
So I'm going to change gears to another book, but in A Scott Ties the Knot, one of my absolute favorite of yours, there is the brilliant side plot of her sketching lobster reproduction. And I was just wondering, was that something that, again, is that research that you found that was the way that they were learning about it? Is that something that people really did?
Oh, absolutely. You know, this is right after, especially started even, 100 years before or something like that. They had the Enlightenment and sadly, colonialism and imperialism. So all of the European countries were spreading out all over the globe, and people were increasingly interested in the natural world. So there was sort of a race to catalog and name all of the different creatures all over the world, and they didn't have photography. So illustration was the way that they could record and share with others how animals looked and how it, including how they reproduced. It's a real thing. If have an illustration, but it's on the other side of the room of the life cycle of frogs from a German illustrator in the 1700s. And it does like, the tadpole and the eggs. And it does indeed, you can learn exactly what position frogs prefer for their reproductive activities.
Who knew when you're researching?
If you care to know. So yes, Maddie the heroine is an illustrator. And so it is her job to wait around for these lobsters to mate so she can find out how it looks and what position do they prefer. And I will tell you face to face.
And I learned something tonight. Thank you so much. So is there...
Poor people who've never read any of my books or heard me talk before are just who is this woman? I don't know.
They're going to be saying, this is amazing. I learned things I never expected from a romance.
You never wanted to know.
So if you could pick any author, living or dead, as a mentor or writing partner, is there any that you would scoop up?
I have to say Jane Austen. I mean, if it wasn't for Jane Austen, I wouldn't be a writer of historical romance. And I really think, if not for Jane Austen, the whole genre of Regency romance wouldn't be the thing that it is. We kind of have this heritage that we trace back from Austen to Georgette Hare, who made the Regency romance kind of a thing, and then through people who made the more mainstream historical romances flourish again in the 70s and 80s, like Kathleen Woodworth and Bertrand Small. So I really don't think that this would be the subgenre that it is if not for Jane Austen and her books. Even she wasn't writing historical romance, obviously. She was writing contemporary fiction for her time, but the enduring popularity and influence of those novels is the reason that we have the genre today. I mean, I have her signature tattooed on my hand. So, if I didn't, this is my writing hand, by the way. If I didn't say Jane Austen, I think I would be lying.
I love that. That's amazing. So in the past, romance books and authors haven't always gotten the same respect as other genres. Do you think that's changing at all? And if so, why? And if not, why?
It may be changing a bit. It's never changing enough or fast enough, in my opinion. To me, it's the whole reason that we don't get the same respect is because of sexism. Romance is mostly written by women for women, and society is basically primed to view anything that is by women for women as lesser. It just is, and it hasn't been that way. It has been that way for most of history, and I think it's going to take us a while to completely rid our society of that prejudice. And people will come with very many excuses, like, "Oh, it's poorly written," or but they inevitably, these people haven't actually even read a romance novel. They just have these assumptions about them, and it's a genre fiction. I mean, I don't expect that romance would ever necessarily, a romance is going to win, the Penn Faulkner Award or something like that. But in terms of other genres of fiction, mystery and sci-fi and thrillers, it really should be treated just the same, because we sell as many books as any of those genres or more. So, there's a whole lot of readers out there who love romance and are passionate about it. And unfortunately, we don't always get our due.
I agree. It's not fair. What is well, speaking of other genres, are there any other genres that you would ever consider writing in, or is romance where you see yourself?
Oh, wow. Every once in a while, I think about maybe writing a young adult, but it would still probably have romance in it. I don't know. I just think I'm a romance reader and writer. And even when I read mysteries or literary fiction or young adult fiction, I'm always kind of reading for the romance. I didn't recognize or understand that about myself until maybe I hit 30 or so. But I think that actually my very first romance that I ever read, to me, it was the romance that actually made me read the book again and again. When I was 8 years old, my family took a very long road trip to Canada, and I was allowed to go to the bookstore and pick one book to take on this trip. And so, of course, what am I going to do? Huge reader. I'm going to pick the biggest book I can find, right? Because I wasn't going to, waste my one book on something I'd be done with in an hour. And I chose because I remember it was the year that Return of the Jedi came out. So there was a huge novelization of The Empire Strikes Back in the bookstore. And that's what I picked. This giant paperback of The Empire Strikes Back. And I still read it in like 2 days, but I read it again and again over the course of this trip. And the parts that I wanted to read over and over again were, of course, all the parts with Han and Leia. All the parts with Han and Leia, like bickering and kissing, and it just was amazing. I think that was like my first romance reading experience in a way, because the sparks that can come between two well-matched and strong-willed people that as they fall in love is just so fun to read. And so yeah, it's all about Han and Leia. I mean, how many people don't have that are my age? I'm sure a lot of us have Han and Leia as one of our formative couples.
I mean, who hasn't said, I know, when somebody tells you they love them?
Right.
I mean,
right.
Be wrong not to.
I'll have to try not to sneak that in a book someday. It's like, I will always want to. I think it's a little too much.
Yeah. So if that was your first romance that you read, what was the most recent one that you just want to tell everybody they need to read?
Oh, I am so glad you asked. I happen to have it right here. Not that this book actually does not come out until I believe the end of May. So is that
That's fine. No, please.
Sometimes one of the best parts of being an author is that sometimes we get books before other people do. So this is a book I read last week. It's called The Queer Principles of Kit Webb, and it is from an author named Kat Sebastian, who's been writing wonderful romance for several years now, but I think this is her first book that's out in like a trade paperback. And I'm so excited that more people are going to get to discover her, because she's just fantastic. So this is a romance it's a historical romance, takes place in the Georgian era, so the late 1700s, I believe. And the hero, Kit, is a reformed highwayman, one of the heroes, and he owns a coffee shop, and he is approached by an aristocrat who is a rake, wonderfully rakish aristocrat named Percy, who is trying to steal something from a duke who is his own father. So he's approaching this, hopefully wants to be reformed highwayman to help him with this task. And, there's obviously more than just this task between them. They develop a relationship, they fall in love. Spoiler alert, it's a romance, they fall in love. And it's just wonderful. I love the relationships that she develops between characters that are so emotional and deep and believable. I just adore her as a writer. So Kat Sebastian. She has a lot of books out already that you can go look up if you want. Another one of my favorites is has Lawrence Brown in the title. What is it? It's like the something of Lawrence Brown. Darn, can't remember. It's amazing. It's like a Beauty and the Beast retelling where one of the heroes, again, is like inventing the telegraph. So radios or something like that. So it's right up my alley. It's like a scientific, nerdy, beastie character. I'm always sold. So anyway, that was a long, you know what, here, great. As a librarian, I was terrible at book talking. I will admit that freely because I'm terrible at remembering titles or character names. I only remember these because one is in the title and Percy is in the blurb that I'm looking at on the back of the book. I would never remember what their names were, but I love the book with everything. So
Emma grabbed The Lawrence Brown Affair by Cat Sebastian.
The Lawrence Brown Affair, okay. That's it. Thank you. Amazing.
And so so that being said, set in the 1700s, would you ever consider writing outside of the Regency era, or is Regency just where your heart is?
I think Regency is where my heart is. I mean, I might, wander a little bit before or after, but it's just a fun period. It has a lot going on. There's a war that's either going on or has recently gone on. It's a time where society is really changing, and there's the very beginnings of some social mobility, the idea of marrying for love, the very beginnings of the industrial era, but yet still that sort of high society glamour. So I don't know, I just really like a lot about the Regency. So
it's wonderful. Are there any characters that you would ever consider going back and visiting for a married romance? Sort of like a sequel?
Oh, wow. It's not something that happens very often, because I think if you wanted to do a sequel romance between a couple that are already married, you have to give them something horrible to overcome, right? You can't just write 400 pages of them like snuggling. I could write 400 pages of them snuggling and love every moment of it, but that's not like what makes a really good book. So that's what fan fiction's for. Right. So I doubt that I would do that completely, but I'd like to put cameos of heroes and heroines from past books into the story of a new character, because then you can kind of see how their life is progressing and that they're still married, they're still in love, even if they're, disagreeing over something or have had some kind of obstacle. You can see that they're still living in their happy ever after.
I really have loved seeing you do that with the characters in the Girl Meets Duke series, seeing all of the men sort of being forced to become friends with each other since their wives are never going to abandon one another. It's pretty great.
Yeah, they don't have a choice.
No, they don't.
Forced romances are my favorite thing to write. I can't get enough of those guys who hate to love each other or love to hate each other. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite heroine, either one that you've written yourself or one that you just love going back and reading their story?
Oh, wow. Well, you know what? Jessica Trent from Lord of Scoundrels is an amazing example. It might just be because we brought up that book. But no, actually, she is one of the best heroines in romance. I love her. She's so strong, and yet she has her vulnerabilities as well. But, she like reads him poetry, and then she also shoots him in the arm, like what? She's got this completely impossible man to like overcome and win over and, turn to a puddle of goo. And she's just always up to the challenge, and watching her triumph over Dane's resistance is just beautiful. I love her.
Amazing. So of your characters, are there any secondary characters that you would ever have come back? Maybe somebody who would show up in another series that we wouldn't expect for their own full novel?
I've done some crossover, at least one crossover book before, where Piers from Say Yes to Marquis. The heroine does not end up saying yes to the Marquis. So the Marquis who got said no to is in another book with a heroine from Spindle Cove named Charlotte. And so that was a lot of fun to kind of, she was younger in the Spindle Cove series, and so I was able to kind of let her grow up a little bit and see how she turned, which was sort of adult she turned into, and write a romance between the two of them that kind of knitted the two series together. I definitely, there's in that same book, the heroine had a sister named Phoebe, who a lot of people ask for her to have a book. And so it's definitely something that could happen. I can't like promise any specific timing or plot or anything like that, but she's definitely kind of up there waiting. And she was very young as well. So they have to kind of grow older in my mind before I'm ready to write.
Was that Do You Want to Start a Scandal? That's
oh no. No? Do You Want to Start a Scandal is the crossover book.
Oh, that's what I meant. Yes, that's the one.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And Phoebe is the sister in Say Yes to the Marquis.
Oh, okay.
She's the sister of the heroine in that book.
Awesome. All right. So do you get, just changing gears a little bit, do you get any say on your cover art or your audiobook readers? They're both lovely, and I was just wondering if you got to have any input on those.
I do now, yes. When I was starting out, it wasn't typical for authors to get any say, especially not beginning authors. So now I'm not a beginner anymore, and the amount of say that authors have has increased across the board. So fortunately, I do get to have some input into how the covers look. I mean, I'm not always, you know, it's not me from start to finish, which it shouldn't be, quite honestly, because I'm not an artist and have to leave that up to the people who are creatively, visually talented at some point. They know better than I do. But yeah, so when it comes to like describing the models that they'll use or the general sort of tone or colors, I do get to make a wish list, so to speak. And eventually, you know, becomes a compromise at some point, but that's the way it is.
So is there any chance that Meet Me in St. Louis inspired the Dead Dolls and the Governess Game?
You know what? I did write at the same time that I was writing Governess Game. I also wrote Meet Me in Mayfair, which is a novella in where How the Duke Stole Christmas, an anthology that I wrote with Sarah McLean and Joanna Shoup and Sophie Jordan. We each contributed a novella. So, and they were all kind of loosely inspired by a Christmas movie. And Meet Me in St. Louis is not exactly a Christmas movie, but it's kind of close. So it has Christmas in it, right? And so that was the inspiration actually for a lot of the plot of Meet Me in Mayfair, in that it starts out with a friend who asks the heroine to switch dance cards with her. And there's a big family that is having to face the prospect of moving. So those two things came from that. But it's very true that the morbidness of Daisy, the one particular orphan in the Governess Game, was also very much like, and now I'm going to forget the name of the little girl.
Oh, it's Tootie.
Tootie, all right. I thought that, and I was like, but that's facts of life. Tootie. So yes, so she definitely was, a little bit of her was in the Governess Game as well.
Meet Me in St. Louis was one of the first musicals I ever got to watch, and that when I read that, I was like, oh, it's Tootie, that's amazing. So I appreciated it. Are there any behind the scenes stories that you can share about why a character was written a certain way or that kind of made it into a book?
Behind the scenes stories. Okay. I will just say that there's usually some little scene or habit that each heroine or each book has, something that's kind of drawn from my life. And it can be something that's so really, really tiny. Like in Romancing the Duke, the heroine sneezes like really tiny, right? She has these tiny sneezes and the hero makes fun of her for it. And, you know, that's just me and my husband. I have these little tiny sneezes and he makes fun of me for it. So it's the little things like that, or even little things that people have told me about their families or their lives. Sometimes I steal them and put them into a book. sometimes I ask first. If there's people I really know, I ask first. There is a piece of, sorry, that story is not really safe for library programs,
okay.
but
I mean,
there's a piece of really good dialogue that was like contributed by a friend's real life experience. I changed a little bit and I asked for permission before I used it. So
that's a good friend.
So little things like that. Yes.
So if Netflix came to you tomorrow and said, Tessa Dare, we now want to make one of your series into a TV show.
Well, let me see. Yeah, I think it would be like 2 seconds to say yes. Not even that, it would, no, I mean, but Netflix has Bridgerton, like they have their big series. So I don't know that that's the chances of that exactly, but there will be, and there are more and more romance, particular one book or a whole series that are being picked up and adapted for film and television now. And that's really exciting to see. So, hopefully just more and more, because no matter which books are adapted, it generally tends to kind of pull some new readers into the genre overall, so little by little, it just hopefully will be a good thing for all of us.
Do you have a particular book that you think of yours that you think would be best for screen?
Well, I mean, I would love Spindle Cove to be a series, just as a series of books, because it has a very solid sort of home base, this little town that has the shop and the tavern and the inn and the beach, and just I wanted to create it as a fun place, like a place with a personality of its own to return to. In fact, when I was creating it, I was like, I want like the Regency Hogsmeade, like from Harry Potter, like a place with cute little I don't know, I can't put into words what I was going to say. If I was good at putting things into words on the spot, I wouldn't be a writer, because I would never have to write these things down. So, but yes, I think that kind of a cozy little village that has a character of its own. So if I were going to choose what to make a series out of, I think I would pick something in that series, because I really enjoyed returning to that town myself, and I hope that other people did as well.
I love the idea of the bull and blossom as honeydukes. Like, I think I'm going to picture that every time I read that now. So were there any characters in any of your novels that just were hard to write, that they kept fighting back at you on the page and wouldn't do what you wanted them to do?
So many of them. Yeah. Thorn from A Lady by Midnight was really hard to write, because I established him as somebody who doesn't talk. So in the previous, books, and he was always just kind of silent, just kind of a few words here and there. So the words to the wise for any other authors or would-be authors: beware of creating characters that don't talk, because when it comes time to write dialogue, you're in trouble. So yeah, finally, okay, I may be about to get cat bombed. I will try to discourage him, but just in case.
I mean, librarians love cats, so I feel like that's just on par for library programming. If it happens,
we've got 3. Look.
Oh, hi.
That's Jack, the terrible one. So yeah, so he was difficult. Some of them I just can't get right because I can't figure them out, but that one in particular, I set myself a very big challenge.
When we talked to Sarah McLean, she said something similar about wit, because she was like, again, I made this character who just grunts, and then I had to make dialogue.
Yep.
Were there any characters that were just so fun to write that you would have just filled up another 300 pages with their dialogue and thoughts?
Probably Colin and Minerva from A Week to Be Wicked. They were just really fun to write banter for.
So has the pandemic influenced your writing at all? Has that changed how you're approaching writing or made it harder?
It's made it much harder for me. I think every writer has had a different response to it. Some people have actually, writing is their happy place. And so they've been able to kind of escape into it, or they've had more time available to them. But then I know that other writers have found it incredibly hard to write at all during the past year. And I am unfortunately in the it's been extremely hard group. So I'm a slow writer to begin with. And personally, I just have found it very, just has thrown me off. But it's starting to get it back a little bit. It's things, starting to look up, and hopefully we're seeing some light at the end of the tunnel. And yeah, that's all I can say about it.
All about hope.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to, you have to, when you're writing happy endings, you kind of have to have that optimistic mindset. And when everything is very stressful around you, it's sometimes difficult.
So what is the role or work of a Tessa Dare hero to dismantle the patriarchy?
Dismantling the patriarchy. Well, I mean, I like to have heroes who start out kind of, jerky. But then they have to be, have to reform. And I tend to write heroines who have these strange or specific interests, and they usually have a goal that's connected to that. And for me, the important thing about the hero is that by the end of the book, her goal is his goal. He wants her to succeed and is committed to helping her do that, and her having credit for having succeeded in it. And I think that that's really important in terms of, I mean, even now, I think we've seen this a lot. Speaking of things we've seen over the past year, the impact that the pandemic has had on women in particular, adding so much domestic responsibility day to day to their professional lives. And a lot of women have had to choose between the two or drop out of the workforce. And that's going to have a big effect on society, I think, that we won't see the full implications of for quite a while. And how much more so were the struggles of trying to be what today would be considered a professional woman in a time where that wasn't even something that was normally thought of, for at least for higher class women. Obviously, there are plenty of women running shops and having other businesses. But yeah, exactly. So the cattail, sorry.
Amazing.
Dismantling the patriarchy with my tail. That's right. So yeah, so it just, a hero supporting the women in their endeavors beyond loving them and wanting them to be partners in romance.
Yeah, that's great. And so I'm just going to ask you 2 more questions, and I will turn over to Q&A if that's okay. And we'll have a.
Of course.
Okay, great. So what was the last book that made you join the Bad Decision Book Club, staying up until 2 in.
Well, that definitely would be this one.
Okay, perfect.
But yeah, I stayed up till 4 in reading it.
That's neat. Okay, I'm adding that to my. We're gonna make sure we have that on the library's order list if we don't already.
I get so invested, and then I will admit, and I, maybe shouldn't admit this, but I am a skipper sometimes. If I get just so desperate to see characters together, I will skim parts just so I can get my fix of that happiness. And then I'll go back and read the parts where they're, actually robbing and fighting and stuff like that.
I mean, I
get there. It comes to a point where I'm I'm too desperate for these people to say that they love each other. So it did that to me.
I understand that. I read most of my books on the Kindle, and I do appreciate that I can search for the word kiss and go find out where are they going to do it.
Yep. To me, there's no shame in doing that. I sometimes there are readers who will read the ending first of a romance, and sometimes people are scandalized by that. But you know what? If that's what you enjoy, why not? The book's yours to do with what you want. You're spending your time with it, as far as I'm concerned. Read all of it, read part of it, read none of it.
And what would be, if you were meeting somebody who never picked up a romance but really wanted to give it a try? And if the answer is the book about Kit, I understand. But are there any that you would say this is a good introduction to romance?
Wow, that's a really hard question for a romance reader to answer sometimes, because like there's 1,000 books in my mind. I was like, whittle that down to 5. I think it would depend also, I would do my reference interview as a librarian and ask particularly, what kind of era. Do you want something with supernatural, paranormal elements? Do they want something historical? Do they want something in this era? And I would put together, a little clutch of books for them specifically. And it's just such a hard question. And
that's okay. I don't know if I could answer it myself, so it was unfair of me too.
The Lord of Scoundrels is a great one to start with for historical romance. Yeah.
Great. And then
I was just going to go back to that again and again, because it truly is one of my favorite books. So,
and then this will be my last question. Is there anything about your writing process that you think is unique to you? Is there a way that you approach writing that is a Tessa Dare approach?
I don't know. I don't really know how other people sit down and write necessarily. It's a very, I know, like I talk out loud to myself sometimes when I'm writing. I'm like mumbling the words as I write them down, and if people around me notice, it's very embarrassing.
That's okay.
Or I read them aloud in like a really, really bad British accent to see how they sound.
I love that. It's amazing.
Every writer, I'm sure, is very different.
So I'm going to go over to the some of the participant questions. Was there a scene that felt really satisfying for you to write?
Satisfying. I mean, I'm kind of like, in what way satisfying? Always the endings, of course, of a romance novel are very satisfying to write, because you're getting to put them together after keeping them apart or on and off for so long. This whole book, I love writing kissing scenes. I just, the first kisses, I just love writing those. Some of my favorite things to write, because I feel like you can reveal so much about character within those scenes that were just like particular, but I'm just gonna think. Okay. Speaking of, with the wink satisfying kind, and also the emotionally satisfying kind, there's a scene in a book called Any Duchess Will Do that I just really, really enjoyed. Like, as I was writing it, I was like, this scene is good. And as people read it, the book, they have kind of like pointed out that scene as something that they particularly enjoyed. So I think it's chapter, I don't know what chapter it was, but it's in an office.
That was my first Tessa Dare book, and I can attest that it made me go and check out the rest of the Spindle Cove, because I didn't realize I had accidentally read book 4 first.
Well, it's a sexy scene, and it's also a lot of emotional confessions within it, right? So I just, I felt like it said a lot about the people. That's the best things about love scenes, is they should say something about the characters and the relationships. Otherwise, no reason for them to be in the book. It's gratuitous. So, yeah.
So somebody asked if you have any contemporaries that you would recommend, or paranormal specifically, one of those.
Paranormals. I have to be honest, I don't read a lot of paranormals, because it's just not my thing, and it's no shade whatsoever on paranormals. But I really think for romance, the whole subgenre thing is, I think it's a lot about finding your niche for what helps you suspend disbelief. Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm.
For some people, that they like to be transported to a different time and place. And and where they can kind of suspend disbelief and immerse themselves in the story. And for some people, it's a gap too far, and they would rather be in the here and now because then it feels most believable to them. And some people just really enjoy like a whole different set of rules and world building that takes place outside of our normal, rules of physics and anatomy, whatever the case may be. So for me, for some reason, paranormals don't let me escape the same way, because I think my nerdy like science brain is always sort of like, but how? Like, I don't know what it is. It's just, but there's always an exception to the rule. There's always an exception to the rule. I'm like looking at my own, quite honestly, I haven't read any contemporaries in the last few. Oh, well, of course, Christina Lauren, great author. Talia Hibbert has this Brown trilogy, Get a Life, Chloe Brown, and I'm going to forget the other titles completely. And it came out a few years ago now, but The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. So it's just amazing. And there, all my needs are fulfilled, the nerdy heroine and the sexy story, romance.
I can recommend to people listening, if you would like to hear Talia Hibbert talk about her books. We actually were able to talk to her last month, and the conversation is up on our library YouTube page. So if you want to see her, and she'll talk about her Brown sisters, those books are amazing. I can't wait to read the third one.
Delightful.
And let's see, what else do we have? Somebody asked how you started getting interested in Portuguese and specifically connecting with Brazilian fans.
I went to Brazil. I mean, my books have been published in Brazil for quite a while, and then I was able to visit maybe 3 years ago now for the Bienal, which is the book festival every year. It's either in Sao Paulo or in Rio de Janeiro. And so my publisher there, Gutenberg, invited me to come to Sao Paulo for that. And it was just the most amazing trip. I just had such a wonderful time. Everybody was so lovely. The readers are so generous and welcoming and enthusiastic. And so, especially then this year, my like so many other people, I was just enthralled with Bridgerton on Netflix, and the fandom, the Brazilian Bridgerton fandom is just amazing. And so I tried to kind of reach out and start following some people, and I wanted to chat with people more because I would love to go back to Brazil. I really hope that I can after this pandemic is over, and I would like to be able to speak with people. So I decided it was a great time to try to learn Portuguese. And so it just started like a month ago, just trying to do some lessons on Duolingo and just talk with people online. And now they have me watching Big Brother Brazil. So I'm just gonna immerse myself in Portuguese and see how much I can learn. It's a lot of fun. Just, people are so encouraging, and now I feel very put on the spot.
No, you're fine. That's
I should
great.
try to say something. I don't know how many Brazilians we have watching.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Can you say just hello, I am a writer?
Hola, su escritora. I think that's how I say a writer.
Great.
And probably uma escritora. I am a writer.
I won't know if you're correct.
Los libros. I saw somebody in chat saying it's correct. Romance de época, that's how you say historical romance. And right now I'm better at the writing than I am at
That's
speaking.
fair.
I did try to put a little video on Instagram when I had a new book out a week or so ago. That had me speaking more Portuguese. I was more prepared. I think I was, I was like, okay, what am I going to say? Okay.
Somebody asked if you would ever consider writing a an epistolatory novel. For those of us, if anybody doesn't know, that's a book written entirely in letters, like Lady Susan by Jane Austen would be one.
Not an entirely, it is not entirely epistolatory. That word always trips me about how to say it. Epistolatory?
Epistolatory? I don't know.
Novel in letters. It's not entirely in letters, but the new Spindle Cove novella that will come out this year, if I have to do, I don't know, whatever it takes, I'm going to make sure this book comes out this year, which is Sally's story. She runs the shop in town, right? And so her romance is called Love Letters from a Lord. And it's probably maybe half or so in letters, because her problem is that this lord has been, his bride ran off to Spindle Cove without really telling him why. He's been writing her letters and letters and letters, and she's not replying. And Sally's problem is that she's not even picking them up, because she's the one who accepts the post for the town. And in those days, the person who received the letter has to pay the postage, right? So Sally is paying the postage for all of these letters as they arrive. And then the woman to whom they are addressed, this runaway fiance, has not been coming and paying the postage for them back. So she's increasingly in the hole for all this postage. And finally, she just sends all these letters back to this guy and it's like, stop writing. She doesn't want you. Take the hint. and you know, by the way, you owe me this much money. And he's just really affronted. You know, he's a lord and he's very affronted by the idea that this shopkeeper is telling him what to do with his love life. And it's just, so then they start writing back and forth to each other. And that's the beginning of that book. It's not the entirety of it, but it is part of it. I love letters in romance. It's really hard to pull off one that's entirely letters. But
yeah. So somebody asked, speaking of doing a novella, how do you decide when a book is going to be a novella like that one, or the Beauty and the Blacksmith, versus a full-length novel?
Sometimes it just depends on how it will fit into the schedule. But sometimes, for example, Beauty and the Blacksmith, Erin was like a cinnamon roll and Diana is a sweetheart. And to write a full-length novel, you really have to pile problems on top of characters. They have to have trauma to resolve or big obstacles to overcome. And they were two such gentle, sweet souls. I didn't want to load awfulness on top of them. I just wanted them to be able to fall in love. And, you know, obviously they have a problem in that she is a gentlewoman and he's a blacksmith. So that's something to overcome. And there's a small subplot with, you know, things that are being stolen in the rooming house. But in general, they just get to fall in love and be the people that they are and find their way to a happy ending. And so that is something that won't necessarily support a whole novel, but it's still a lovely, so it makes a perfect novella. Because to me, a novella is just writing all the good parts. Like it's all the mushy parts, you know, right? The first kiss and the confessions of love and the happy ending and with a little bit of tension in there. That makes a great novella. So I really love writing novellas. And so sometimes it's just the story isn't, I don't want to write a story that's so complicated for that couple, or I'm setting out to write a novella in particular, like when we did the How the Duke Stole Christmas anthology, you know, obviously that was going to be a novella from the beginning. So I chose to write a story that was sort of contained to a very narrow time frame. And so different reasons, but I enjoy writing novellas. So I'll find excuses to write them where I can.
So somebody asked if you had mentioned having Jane on your writing hand. Now, do you write by hand when you're writing your books, or are you a computer typer?
I do a lot of the drafting by hand. I'll write sort of a very loose outline of a scene, and then I'll type it in and make it more complete as I do that.
Do you have a favorite Jane Austen hero or heroine? Somebody wanted to know.
Okay, well, my favorite couple is Darcy and Lizzie. So that is my favorite Jane Austen couple. My favorite Jane Austen novel, hot take, is Emma. I know it's not the usual answer, but I think it is a very well crafted novel and story. And I identify with Emma, not in the case of being very rich and coddled by an indulgent father, but in the sense of, I love that she makes mistakes and has a good heart, but also has to learn. Sometimes she screws up. And in some ways, you know, for example, Lizzie Bennet, she never really does screw up much. I mean, she offends Mr. Darcy, but he always deserves it. And so she talks back to Lady Catherine, but she deserves it too. So I like that Jane Austen set out to write sort of a difficult heroine in Emma, somebody that would be a little harder to love. And so I admire that book for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, Emma's great. It's amazing. Jane Austen's ability to make you root for a character who keeps screwing up that much is pretty impressive. And
some people really don't like that book at all, but
they're just wrong. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm, you know, and I'm not a big Persuasion fan, which is, I know, also like heresy, but I mean, I don't dislike it. I love the book. But to me, like, I hear like 8 years and he just like doesn't make an effort. I don't know. I just then like one letter is supposed to fix everything, you know, right. Like, no, it's a great letter. Let's not give it its due. It's a great letter. It's definitely better than a Darcy letter, but it's still just one letter. Yeah. It's got to do some more work.
If somebody were picturing Spindle Cove, would the coast of Lyme be a good idea to picture, or is that not what you were picturing?
I personally is picturing something a little bit further east in Sussex, which is Lyme is like very stark white cliffs. Also, you see they're similar in Dover, like those very steep chalk. I mean, that's why it's called Lyme, right? Cliffs with exposed. That's where a lot of the early fossils and things were found. They call it the Jurassic Coast. I thought of it more as like the Hastings area, which has sort of a rocky cove and a history of smuggling and caves and things like that, because I really like that idea. But you can picture Lyme if it makes you happy. So it's beautiful too.
Somebody wanted to know if they were interested in requesting a signed copy of your work. Is that something they could request on the website?
Yeah, there is every 3 months now, I'm going to a particularly romance-focused bookstore called The Ripped Bodice in LA and signing books for people who order them online. So I should have the link up on my website, but it's possible that, there you go. There's the Ripped Bodice's website. It's a little difficult to find the link from their homepage. I think you have to go to shop and then to authors, and then there should be a page for me there, and you can order a book and tell me how you want it signed, and then I will do that, and the store will ship it to you.
Great. It's like Emma put it in the chat, so
okay, perfect.
Thank you, Emma. And let's see, we'll do one more question and then we'll let you go because we have kept you a little bit over time, which thank you so much, Tessa, for
I'm having a great time. It's fine.
Okay.
I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, well, but if it's okay, I'll do a few more.
But I know you have places to go and things to do.
So maybe if it's okay, we'll do 2 more. Would that be all right?
That would be fine.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's see. Well, I'll ask you this quick one while I'm going through the list, but can you tell us the recipe for a sham sandwich?
Oh God, I hope I never find out. I like coming up with things that then I will never actually have to. So for those who haven't read the books, there's in the current Girl Meets Duke series, the heroine of The Wallflower Wager, Penelope Campion, who goes by Penny. She is the animal rescuer. And she is a vegetarian, and she has created a lot of awful recipes for fake meat ingredients. And so sham is supposed to take the place of ham. So she makes these terrible sandwiches and forces, basically the heroes end up having to prove themselves by eating these sandwiches because that's like a test. Can you be a hero by eating these sandwiches with a straight face and not hurting her feelings? So I think that I explained somewhere in there a little bit about it, like it being some kind of loaf of like turnips with a little bit of beetroot to like color it, or something like that, and then slice it. But oh my gosh, I hope. So she has in the other books, she introduces something in each book, and so in another book it's tuna-ish. I think it's roast leaf in the third book instead of roast beef. I won't talk about the bride bed sandwiches yet. Just have to wait.
Oh no, there's more to come.
Yeah, maybe. So she, yeah, I don't know what exactly is in sham. If anybody wants to attempt to make it,
don't send it to you.
I think now we have a lot more, of meat substitutes that are much tastier.
Yes.
Yeah. Bless her heart. She's trying.
She tries so hard.
And I don't actually eat that much meat, so it's not making fun of people who are vegetarians in any way. But some of the substitutes for things are just sort of why?
Why? So somebody said that they recently discovered your books. They devoured them in a week, and they were, and a lot of their other reading of romance is a really diverse characters, whether it be LGBT, race, abilities. I'm just wondering if you had any stories brewing that would feature characters that come from some of those other groups that don't show up in books as often.
That is a great question. And it's a topic of conversation among romance authors, and in particular historical romance authors, especially now that Bridgerton has come out with a much more diverse cast. It's definitely been a lack in our genre for a long time. And the question now for authors who are white and straight, as I am, is it better for us to attempt to write those characters, or to leave room for people who have lived that experience to write those characters? Own voices is what we call the books. I have written quite a few characters with disabilities, actually. But in terms of, and I wrote one heroine in the governess game who was half Filipina, because my own kids are half Filipino. So it felt like something, and I've lived in that country for a while, so it felt like something I could relate to enough and understand enough that I could do well. I would like to write more non-white characters in the future, but I'll have to be very careful to do it well. And to also not take space from somebody else in romance who could be writing that from a more informed perspective. If you are looking for, I also had this book nearby too. If you're looking to read Black characters in Regency romance, I highly recommend Vanessa Riley. This is her latest, A Duke, the Lady, and a Baby. Cutest title ever. Was so jealous of this title when the book came out. Not all of her characters are Black, but she's writing wonderful romances that are often interracial, or have biracial or Black characters. And I just think she's amazing, and she's a great voice that's getting more and more visibility in the genre, and that's fantastic.
That's great, thank you. And we'll do just one last question of, what's your favorite non-romance novel that you just enjoy?
I actually put one of these near here. I don't know that it's like my favorite novel ever, but it was a novel that I really enjoyed this year, and it's the most ironic pick ever because it is about the plague. I don't know, when everything sort of started and went down last year, I suddenly got this sort of very strange interest in the history of pandemics and plagues. And anyway, so I read this book, which is called Year of Wonders by Geraldine Brooks. I guess it didn't win the Pulitzer, but she has won the Pulitzer for another book, or more than one perhaps at this time. But it takes place in a small English village in the year, it's in the 16 or 1700s. It's in Tudor times, 1666. That's right. That was a horrible year for England. 1666. I mean, it lived up to the number. It was the year of the Great Fire of London, and then they had a plague outbreak too. So this little town somehow got a very specific, isolated outbreak of the plague. And what they did was they closed themselves off purposefully for a year so that it wouldn't spread to other towns. And it was like this immense sacrifice on the part of this town. They basically quarantined themselves. This book follows a young woman who, she goes through, she's widowed with children, who becomes sort of a caretaker of many of the people in this town. Either she has an immunity to it, or I can't remember why she's unaffected, but she is, it's just a fascinating story. It's not nonfiction, it's historical fiction, but it's really a great book and just gripping. So if you are like me and take a morbid interest in parts of history that touch on modern times, Year of Wonders.
Well, thank you. Well, and Tessa, thank you so much for coming and being part of our Romance Author series. This has been absolutely delightful to talk to you and get to hear about all of your books. Thank you for brightening the pandemic times, frankly.
Thank you so much for having me and being a bright spot in my life as well. It's really lovely to get to connect with people. And, I kind of hope that this has opened the possibilities for the future. There's no reason we have to stop doing online events in the future. It allows us to see or reach different people, and it's great, that part of it.
Thank you so much. It's amazing to get to hear our favorite authors talk about their work. So thank you.
Thank you for all your good questions. And I apologize for all the very weird answers, but that
they were
the best weird.
It's great. It's great.